first time they tried to leave, he wouldn't let them. Not because he was cruel, but because he believed they weren't ready to die yet. In a quiet corner of New York, behind clean white walls and polite smiles, something deeply unsettling was happening. Patients who should have passed didn't, and the longer they stayed, the stranger things became. This is the story of a doctor who didn't just fight death, he tried to control it. It all begins with a man named Elias Galt. On paper, he was everything you'd want in a doctor. Brilliant, calm, respected. The kind of person families trusted without question. He spoke softly, listened carefully, and carried himself with a confidence that made people feel safe. But there was something just slightly off, not enough to alarm anyone at first, just a feeling some patients couldn't quite explain. Elias didn't believe in death the way others did. To him, death wasn't a natural end. It was a failure, a problem that hadn't been solved yet. And unlike most doctors, he wasn't willing to accept that some lives simply couldn't be saved. That belief slowly became an obsession. At first, his methods seemed harmless. He worked longer hours than anyone else, took on the most critical cases. Patients who had been given up on by other hospitals were suddenly being kept alive under his care. Families were grateful. They called him a miracle worker. But miracles have a cost. Within the first few years, rumors began to spread quietly among hospital staff. Nurses whispered about patients who lingered far beyond what made sense. Machines kept running long after hope had faded. And Elias, he never seemed willing to let go. Before we go further, if stories like this pull you in, make sure to like and subscribe to Night Archive. It helps more than you think, and it keeps these hidden stories alive. Now here's where things start to shift. Some patients began to regain consciousness briefly, only to describe something disturbing. They spoke of feeling trapped, not just physically, but mentally, like they were stuck somewhere between life and death. One patient reportedly whispered, "He won't let me leave." At first, these were dismissed as hallucinations, side effects of medication, but the pattern kept repeating. Elias had started experimenting, not in the obvious way. There were no secret labs or dramatic procedures. Instead, it was subtle. Adjustments to life support, unusual combinations of drugs, techniques that weren't exactly approved, but not explicitly forbidden either. He was operating in a gray area, pushing boundaries just enough to avoid detection. And for a while, it worked. His patients didn't die. Not when they were expected to, not when they should have, but they didn't fully live either. Families started noticing changes. Their loved ones were technically alive, but something was missing. Awareness faded. Personalities dulled. It was like the person they knew was slowly slipping away, while the body remained. One case in particular stood out. A woman in her early 40s had suffered severe trauma and was not expected to survive the night. Under Elias' care, she lived. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, but she never truly woke up. Her eyes would open occasionally, but there was no recognition, no response, just presence. Her family begged Elias to let her go. He refused. He insisted there was still a chance, that the brain needed time, that giving up now would be a mistake. And because he was Elias Galt, because of his reputation, they trusted him, even when it didn't feel right. Behind the scenes, tension in the hospital grew. Some staff began documenting irregularities. Others avoided working with him entirely. But no one wanted to accuse a man who had saved so many lives. Until one night changed everything. A nurse, working a late shift, noticed something unusual in one of Elias' patients. The monitors showed stable readings, but something didn't add up. She checked the patient manually, and what she found didn't match the machines. The patient had no real signs of life, yet the systems were keeping everything artificially stable. When she reported it, Elias dismissed her concerns. Calmly, confidently, but this time it didn't go away. An internal review was quietly initiated. That's when the deeper truth began to surface. Records showed multiple cases where patients had been sustained far beyond medically reasonable limits. In some instances, consent forms were incomplete. In others, families had not been fully informed about the extent of the interventions. And then came the most disturbing discovery. Some patients had shown clear signs that their bodies were shutting down, but the interventions continued anyway. Not to heal them, but to keep the process going. It wasn't about saving lives anymore. It was about delaying death indefinitely. When confronted, Elias didn't deny it. Instead, he explained it in a way that unsettled everyone in the room. He spoke about the threshold between life and death, about how little we truly understand it. He claimed he was exploring something important, something that could change medicine forever. To him, these patients weren't victims. They were progress. The hospital couldn't ignore it anymore. An official investigation was launched. Elias was suspended, but even then, he remained calm, almost relieved, like he had been waiting for someone to finally notice. The public reaction was immediate. Some saw him as a monster. Others believed he was ahead of his time, a visionary misunderstood by a system that feared what it couldn't control. But the families, they told a different story. They spoke about the long months of false hope, the emotional toll, the way their loved ones had been held in a state that didn't feel like life or death. And one phrase kept coming up again and again. He wouldn't let them go. In the end, Elias Galt lost his license. The hospital distanced itself completely. Official statements were released, policies were tightened. And just like that, the man who once defied death disappeared from the public eye. But the story didn't end there. Years later, small fragments began to surface. Unconfirmed reports, patients in private care facilities showing similar patterns, prolonged states that didn't quite make sense. And in quiet conversations, one name would occasionally come up. Elia's. No proof, no records, just whispers. And maybe that's what makes this story so unsettling. Not just what happened, but the possibility that it never truly stopped. Because here's the question that lingers. If someone had the ability to keep you alive, long after you should be gone, would you want them to? Or would you hope they'd let you go? Stories like this live in the gray space between fear and curiosity. And sometimes, the most terrifying part isn't what we know, it's what we don't. If this story stayed with you, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Elias was wrong or just too early? And if you think someone else needs to hear this story, share it with them. This is Night Archive, and some stories don't end when they're supposed to.